Hey everyone, it's been a while since I've done one of these, but I'm really looking forward to this new episode of Fresh from the Cellar, a series where I suggest fresh new games that you should really check out. Today I'm going to be talking about a brand new project that just launched on Kickstarter on the 26th. It's Through Ice and Snow from Two Tomatoes Games. I was super lucky to get a chance to try this one out with the publisher before its release date, so I'm going to give you a quick overview of what the game is all about, and then let you know my thoughts about it. And at the end of that, I hope you have a good idea on whether you want to back this one or not. So if you want to know more about Through Ice and Snow, or if you just want to know what's cooler than being cool, then might I suggest? Hi, I'm Alex from Might I Suggest a Game, a channel devoted to helping you find your perfect board game. Today, like I mentioned before, we're doing an episode of Fresh from the Cellar all about Through Ice and Snow from Two Tomatoes Games.
Let's kick some ice.
I love suggesting new games for you guys, and I'm always on the lookout for what's coming down the pipeline. So if you have any new games in mind that you want a preview of, go ahead and drop it below in the comments. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit subscribe and that little bell button so you can get notified when I post new content. We've had a lot of new subscribers here lately, so I really want to make sure your voice is heard, so talk to me. Anyways, back to it. Let's talk about this awesome game. Through Ice and Snow is a new point-to-point movement worker placement adventure from Two Tomatoes Games that plays with 1 to 4 players in around 30 minutes per player. In Through Ice and Snow, players will take on the role of 19th century Arctic explorers, mapping new territories, navigating treacherous ice flows, and befriending the native peoples in order to carve their names in the history books as the most intrepid adventurers ever to set foot in the Northwest Passage. Now, becoming a legendary Arctic explorer doesn't happen overnight. You'll have to manage your crew's health and morale through all the fuel shortages and ice storms that you might face along the way.
I mean, that sounds bad, but whatever.
And even though this is technically a competitive game, if certain negative conditions are met, the entire expedition will fail, which means everybody loses. So, maybe don't do that. Anyways, the game is played over several rounds, each of which is broken up into 3 main phases. First up is the navigation phase. Although you're all traveling together in a fleet, there will always be one expedition leader who will get to decide your next exploration point. This becomes really important when you're trying to map out certain locations based on the objectives given to you at the beginning of the game. Anyways, after the leader is determined, they'll need to use some dynamite to clear a path in the ice, and they'll have to choose whether to navigate along the coast or the high seas. Coastal navigation will give you bigger bonuses, but is also much more dangerous than high seas navigation, so keep that in mind. Anyways, once you've finished all necessary steps and resolved the navigation event, then you're ready to head to the action phase. The action phase is surprise, when everybody gets to take actions at the location you've just arrived at. From the get-go, you have 3 different types of officers: the red captain, the yellow carpenter, and the green scientist, as well as 3 sailors that will help your officers take certain actions. Throughout the game, you can also enlist the help of Inuit guides to give you more flexibility and more actions. Like most worker placement games, you'll take turns placing your officers and sailors on different actions until everyone either passes or can take no further actions. This becomes a delicate dance of which actions to take and when, especially since the spots fill up pretty quickly, so choose wisely. Now, I'm not going to go through every action in this overview, but as a reminder, you should always make sure to keep an eye on your essentials like food, fuel, health, and morale. This will help you have a good sense of what types of actions you'll need to take in order to survive. Anyways, once everyone is actioned out, you'll move on to the 3rd and final phase, the boarding phase, where everyone hops back on their ships and gets ready to go to the next destination. In this phase, you'll have to feed all of your crew members too, so like I mentioned before, make sure you have some extra food waiting in the wings, or you might take some serious penalties.
That sounds like a dare, Harry.
It's a double dare.
When/if you reach your final destination, you'll toss together the many ingredients of your point salad, including the bonuses from your personal objectives, and whoever ends up with the most prestige points in the end wins. Anyways, I hope this was enough to give you a good sense of what this game is all about. Now let's jump into my thoughts and recommendations for Through Ice and Snow. The biggest thing that struck me when I first played Through Ice and Snow is how thematic everything felt. I mean, the game itself can be pretty brutal. There's events that happen every round that can totally knock you off track. You can run out of food, your crew could be low on morale, and it felt like you're constantly just taking actions in order to survive. Usually, these types of super brutal games can be a little bit of a slog.
Slog.
But I feel like it works really well in this game because the journey through Antarctica and the Northwest Passage was brutal. So this feels like you're really going through all the things that they were going through during their expeditions. It's almost like a documentary, but you get to make the story this time.
Nice.
I also like how this game can be pretty much semi-cooperative. I mean, obviously you're taking actions and making decisions based on what's best for your explorer and your objectives, but at the same time, you're just trying to make sure your fleet doesn't crash. Because of that mutual dependency, I found that a lot of the decision making ended up benefiting one another, which means that the gameplay wasn't too mean, and hopefully you and your friends can all stay friends at the end of this one. Another thing I'll mention is I think Through Ice and Snow does a great job with action economy. Because of the limited amount of crew members and the limitations to what each officer can do, I felt like the tension in the decision making was really tight because you couldn't do everything you wanted to do, like any good worker placement game. And I'll also throw in a note about the board. I think it's so cool the way that the board is modularly put together, and it makes it feel like every game has a little bit more variation, which means a little bit more replayability, which I'm always a fan of. And speaking of replayability, I've heard there's a couple of major variants / expansions that might be coming with the Kickstarter that will add in even more challenges. So you might want to check out that Kickstarter link. I'll leave it down below in the description. Anyways, here's my recommendations for the types of people that I think would really love Through Ice and Snow. First off, if you're a cold weather person at all, if you own a parka, if you've been ice fishing, if you know how to ice skate, or maybe if you're even just wearing a beanie right now, you should check this game out. Second, if you remember that 90s movie Balto, and you've always dreamed about saying mush to some sled dogs, and you really want to take advantage of the sled dog mechanic in this game, then you should definitely check this one out. And lastly, if you're just looking for a super thematic worker placement adventure that'll give you a huge sense of accomplishment if you're able to defeat both the elements and your fellow explorers, then might I suggest Through Ice and Snow. Thanks so much for sticking around for today's episode of Fresh from the Cellar. I hope you got a good sense of what Through Ice and Snow is all about, and I hope it helps you make a decision on whether or not to back this one. I want to give a big shout out to Alex Murphy and Two Tomatoes Games for giving me early access to this one. Plus, I want to send a congratulations their way for getting fully funded in the first day. That's right, folks, they're fully funded, so if you're interested, make sure you jump on that campaign before it goes away. Anyways, thanks so much for everyone who supported the channel so far. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so I can keep growing this channel and keep helping you find your perfect board game. Once again, this has been a Might I Suggest a Game production, and I'm Alex, your board game sommelier, signing off.